Hello and welcome to Everything is Final Fantasy. I'm Ira Kriesman.
And I'm the other one.
And on this episode, Magic the Gathering is, again, Final Fantasy.
Always has been.
Fair enough. So we've had our first preview week, which means we've got like 400 cards that have been previewed.
What happened?
A lot. A lot happened. And a lot of them have been from 7 and 10 and 14. A lot of them have been from 6, but maybe not as many as I would like. I'm actually a little annoyed, and I hate to say this, but I'm a little annoyed about just how much screen time, how much attention 14 is getting.
Yeah.
On the other hand, 14 has like 5 expansions and is one of, if not the most popular MMORPG of all time, so
yeah,
I get it. And so many people love it so much, I'm not going to shit on something other people love.
Totally. No, I had a similar response a couple years ago when IGN redid their top 100 video games of all time, like they always do. And Final Fantasy 14 was I think 7 was way back in the 90s, and then 14 was up in the 40s, and no other Final Fantasy game was on the list. So I know I've played a little more of it than you have, and I do love that game, but I know where that comes from. And so I understand it as great as it is, and I do still need to get to, because even a lot of these cards that have been revealed, you've texted me a few of them, you've been like, do you know who this person is? And some of them I'm like, yeah, and others I'm like, nope. So, it's, and it is a little bit bummer to feel like, as people who have done so much Final Fantasy over the years, that we're somehow now a little bit left out of this big part of it. That feels a little bit of a bummer.
It is, and I would like some of the earlier games to get more attention, like Final Fantasies 1 through 5 have maybe a dozen cards each. On the other hand, there is still a week of previews, so there will be more, presumably.
Yeah.
On the other hand, if this set does really well, maybe we'll get the next Magic the Gathering Final Fantasy set focused on some of the stuff they couldn't focus on this time. So Drew, here's what I want you to do. Get on your internet machine.
Yep.
Go to scryfall.com, scryfall.com.
Everyone at home, you can follow along with us.
And then, are you there? Are you ready?
I am, yeah.
In the search bar, type ART:FF1.
ART:FF1. I think this is good podcasting we're doing right now.
Well, is there a way you're supposed to do this hobby?
Yeah, right. Probably. Yes, and I've been told many times that we don't do it right.
Oh, good. This is why I try not to pay attention to the internet. All right. Do you see, what do we got, like 10 cards?
Yeah. Wait, no. ART:FF1, nothing happened.
ART:FF1.
Mother.
And it's an I, not a number 1.
All right. Yeah. Now we're doing good. Actually, it works with the number 1 as well.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So we've already talked about some of these cards. We talked about the Dragon of Mount Golg, and we talked about Garland, Knight of Cornelia. What I want to draw your attention to first is Black Mage's Rod. This is a new mechanic. The mechanic is Job Select. So Black Mage's Rod.
It could be a black mage named Rob.
There could be. For one generic and a black, you get an artifact equipment with Job Select. And Job Select says, when this equipment enters, create a 1/1 colorless hero creature token, then attach this to it. So you get a 1/1, and they immediately get the equipment on them. It's a lot like, say, choosing the Black Mage in Final Fantasy 1.
Yeah.
And then the equipment says, equipped creature gets +1/+0, and has, whenever you cast a non-creature spell, this creature deals 1 damage to each opponent, and is a wizard in addition to its other types. So it'll be a hero wizard, a 2/1 hero wizard with, whenever you cast a non-creature spell, deal 1 damage to each opponent, which is pretty great. Now, I don't know how good these cards will be, because again, I'm not real good at evaluating strategy in Magic. I just love to play the game.
Yeah.
But oftentimes when a single card gets you 2 pieces on the battlefield, that's considered pretty good. And there are a lot of these equipments with Job Select. Only 3 for Final Fantasy 1, but a bunch of them for Final Fantasy 14.
Sure, which makes sense.
We've also got a mountain here that appears to be from Mount Golg, the volcano where, I think that's the volcano where you fight Kali.
Carrie?
Carrie, there it is.
Well, it's probably supposed to be more Kali, like what you said. That was one of those translation things in the early days. But yeah.
We've got Nyxborn Ancient, as played by the Cloud Sea Jin. That's another Through the Ages Final Fantasy card with old Yoshitaka Amano art on an existing Magic the Gathering card. I really like most of these skins, but some of them don't fit, and I'll tell you what I mean when we go to another game.
Okay, because this one looks rad.
It looks rad as heck, and I think it fits.
Yeah.
Starting town, we got a new land type. Town is a new land type.
Okay.
So it's a land-town. This land enters tapped unless it's your first, second, or third turn of the game. So starting town, right?
Gotcha. Right.
It taps for a colorless, or tap and pay 1 life to add 1 mana of any color. I'm not sure how good that is, but if you get it on one of your first few turns and can start adding colored mana, that's probably pretty good.
Yeah.
Town greeter. I just love that the town greeter, like the person who stands at the head of the town and tells you where you are, is a creature, which is
first NPC
great.
of Final Fantasy, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then a couple more equipment, the warrior's sword and the white mage's staff. And I really like that job select mechanic. I think that's really cool. And I think that really fits with, this is how you choose your warrior. This is how you choose your white mage.
Yeah. And I really like the art for all of them. The black mage and the white mage are, of course, classic designs. You can only do so much with the black mage, but still it looks super rad. I love the long red hair on the white mage, but I especially love that old school, the red hair on the fighter, that look of, like they've captured that classic just 8-bit sprite somehow in this fully realized 3D form here, and I think it looks awesome.
Any others that jump out to you, or shall we go to 2?
Let's go to 2.
All right. A couple things here I want to point out. First, we see Cid, Timeless Artificer.
Okay, so 2 doesn't work with the number. You've got to do the double eyes.
All right, so click on Cid, because I want to show you something, because I love this. If you click on Cid, and then it will list all the different Cids on the right there. And if you click on View All Prints, do you see that?
Oh, yeah. Where is...
Did you click on
there
the
we
card?
Go. I have to like hover the mouse over them.
Well, if you click on View All Prints, it will show all the different printings.
Oh, I see. And you can just hover over them and it'll show you. That's so great. So it's the same card reskinned with the Cids from each different Final Fantasy.
Yes. So 11 to 16, and they're all the same card. And I'm going to go ahead and read this one. For 2 generic, a white and a blue, you get a 4/4 legendary creature, Human Artificer. Artifact creatures and heroes you control get +1/+1 for each artifact you control and each Artificer card in your graveyard. A deck can have any number of cards named Cid, Timeless Artificer. And he's got cycling for white and a blue. And so not every Cid from 2 to 16 is an artificer in that way, is about making things or machines, but a lot of them are. Like 16 Cid isn't really that guy.
Right.
But it's a great way to say, hey, look, we know Cid is this guy who shows up over and over again, and he's usually got something to do with artifacts or machines or vehicles, right? And so I just love this.
Yeah, this is really, really cool. I'm just looking at all the different artworks now, and Final Fantasy VI Cid and his banana yellow thing looking into the, like, oh man, these artworks are absolutely fantastic. So no Al Cid or Grace.
Right.
I think there's like you said, there's not every single one is even necessarily included. I was trying to think if there were a few others, but there is Final Fantasy 12 Cid.
Right.
Evil Cid.
Right.
Wow, these are cool. Final Fantasy 9 Cid's looking badass with that mustache, man. That is some fantastic stuff.
I like the way they interpreted the Yamano art of Final Fantasy II's Cid and he's got those funky shoulder blades, shoulder pads.
Pads, I guess. Yeah.
And his little assistant in the background, and Final Fantasy V Sid, you can see Mid in the background.
Yeah.
So looking back at the Final Fantasy II cards, perhaps my favorite, and you know how much I love that word,
Indeed.
of this little batch is Commune with Beavers. Isn't that
yes, I
fantastic?
think I will. Thank you very much.
It's great. I don't know how good the card is, but it's for a green. You look at the top 3 cards of your library. You may reveal an artifact, creature, or land card from among them, put it into your hand, put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. And Drew, the flavor text is...
Guy speak beaver. See, that's how you know you're dealing with people who know their stuff.
That's right. One of the things that Mark Rosewater has said about designing Universes Beyond is they try to find 1 or 2 people in the building who can be the subject matter expert, the people who are fans of Doctor Who or Warhammer 40k or whatever. And for Final Fantasy, there were several people in the building who could serve that position.
Yeah, I'm not at all surprised. I've seen a couple. I haven't watched the whole things yet. At some point, we should talk about these. And I should note, we're going to try to do a series of these, talking about as many cards as we can. We're not going to be able to talk about all of them, but this is a lot of fun, and we're going to have fun with it. And there have been some panel conversations. So once we've had our conversations, I'd love to listen to those. I think IGN has one with a lot of the people that worked on this, and I'd be very curious to hear what they had to say, and then maybe we can chat about that a little. But back to Final Fantasy II.
So we got Firion, Wild Rose Warrior. I would be surprised if we get too many characters out of Final Fantasy II. But I'm glad we got Firion.
Yeah, that's the one, if you're going to only get one, again, it's the Dissidia principle, right?
Right.
If you're taking one. Though it would be rad to see a Maria. Right? Or a
Minwu. Or
Minwu would be great.
Princess Hilda.
Minwu's in Theater Rhythm.
Oh, Minwu's in Theater Rhythm?
Yeah.
Cool. I think Princess Hilda would be good. I mean, there are lots of things you could do from Final Fantasy II.
Right.
But not as many as you could do from, say, Final Fantasy XIV, just because Final Fantasy XIV is so big. So, Firion, the Wild Rose Warrior. For 2 generic and a red, you get a 3/3 legendary creature, Human Rebel Warrior, and I think that Rebel is very important. Equipped creatures you control have haste. Again, having some of these Final Fantasy heroes focused on equipment makes a lot of sense to me. Whenever a non-token equipment you control enters, create a token that's a copy of it, except it has this equipment. This equipment's equipped ability costs 2 less to activate. Sacrifice that token at the beginning of the next end step. So in a way, this feels to me like his Dissidia persona, his Dissidia role, where you can use all the different kinds of weapons and summon them all at once and like, snag this one or that one. But it's also just kind of what you do in Final Fantasy II. Everyone can use any piece of equipment, any spell, and I think that's an interesting way to implement it.
Yeah, that's really clever.
The next Firion, Swordmaster, is one of the reasons I don't always like the skins.
Okay.
So he's playing, in this case, SRAM. Gosh, it's really small on my screen. SRAM Senior Edificer, who's a dwarf advisor in where was he? Kaladesh. That has got a new name that I can't recall. Anyway, he's from this is a regular Magic card being skinned as Firion the Swordmaster, but it's legendary creature dwarf advisor, and Firion really isn't either of those things.
Right. Yeah.
So
that is kind of bizarre. I don't know quite what they're going for there, and I don't know any of the lore that you just said, apart from what you just said. But yeah, dwarf advisor. I didn't even until you said that. I was like, oh, it says that right there on the card, and that doesn't make any sense at all.
Right. So sometimes I think skins make a lot of sense, and maybe with a detail here or there, you can ignore it if you need to. But for me, the creature types are important, and so there are, especially when they did it with Godzilla the first time on Ikoria, most of them made sense, but some of them didn't, and I kind of shrugged my shoulders and didn't worry about it. For this set, though, this one bothers me. On the other hand, whenever you cast an aura, equipment, or vehicle spell, draw a card, again makes sense with that Firion is able to use anything. So
right. So the ability works, but
right.
Yeah. Gotcha. Yeah.
I also do want to talk about the Emperor of Palamecia.
Paramecia.
For a blue and a red, you get a 2/2 legendary creature human noble wizard. Tap to add blue or red. Spend this mana only to cast a non-creature spell. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, if at least 4 mana was spent to cast it, put a +1/+1 counter on the Emperor of Palamecia. Then, if it has 3 or more +1/+1 counters on it, transform it. And if you will recall, Drew, from Final Fantasy I, we got Garland, and then he transformed into Chaos. I think all the main bad guys are getting this treatment, where it's their original form on one side and their hyper form on the other.
Right. That's pretty cool.
If you click on that transform button, you get the Lord Master of Hell.
Yeah. This artwork is so... Oh, look at this. I want this one.
So he's a legendary creature, demon noble wizard. He's only a 3/3, but Starfall. Whenever this attacks, it deals X damage to each opponent, where X is the number of non-creature, non-land cards in your graveyard. So if you've got a Spellslinger deck, as they're called, with a bunch of instants and sorceries in your graveyard, every time he attacks, he's doing a lot of damage. And I think that's super cool.
That's, yeah. I actually understood that one.
Anything else here you want to talk about, or shall we scooch on?
I'm ready for Final Fantasy III.
So we don't have a lot here yet. I do hope we get more.
This,
Yeah.
I feel 3's never been my favorite, but even just seeing this pop up, I'm a little bummed out here. But let's go over them, and then I'll see if I can organize my thoughts into what else. And we know there's more coming, but okay, What do we got?
Well, I want to point out that they said they're just doing the mainline numbered games. So no sequels, no spin-offs. And I think that means no Final Fantasy III DS, right? So no Refia or Luneth or Arc or Ingus.
Fair enough. And well remembered. I don't know. I probably could have gotten them off the top of my head, but not as quickly as you just did. It would have taken me a minute.
The Adventurer's Inn, I kind of love that. When this land enters, you gain 2 life. Otherwise, it just taps for a colorless. We got Sid again. We got this really cool forest. Probably the first Chocobo forest, right? Because it's got Chocobos on it.
Fair enough.
The Item Shopkeep, a human citizen for one generic and 1 red. You get a 2/2. Whenever you attack, target attacking equipped creature gains menace until end of turn. That's fine. Yeah.
Okay.
What I really like, though, is the crystals chosen, the Darkness Crystal, and Zand, Dark Mage. Now, Zand does not transform, so maybe I was wrong about my earlier...
Boo. How come? Well, I guess
Cloud
having
of
him I was going to say, having him transform into Cloud of Darkness doesn't exactly make sense, because they're 2 separate entities, but I might have been tempted.
Well, and maybe we still get the Cloud of Darkness.
Yeah, right.
So the crystals chosen creates, is a sorcery, for 5 generic and 2 white. Create 4 1/1 colorless hero creature tokens, then put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. So that sounds to me like it costs a lot, but the fact that it's depicting 4 Onion Knights before the crystal in the cave is pretty darn great.
Yeah, it does make me want an Onion Knight card. It's sort of strange. I'm like, well, there they are. There's no the Onion Knight, or even the Onion Knights would have potentially been interesting, but no, okay.
Yeah, and we might still, and who knows. Right. But for what this is depicting, I like the story this is telling. It's maybe costs a bit too much for what it does, but I just like the look of the card.
Yeah, me too.
Then we have the Darkness Crystal, and remember we had the Warriors of the Light and the Warriors of the Dark in Final Fantasy III.
Yeah.
For 2 generic and 2 black, you get a legendary artifact. Black spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. If a non-token creature an opponent controls would die, instead exile it and you gain 2 life.
Dark magic.
Yeah. For 4 generic and 2 black, tap this. Put target creature card exiled with the Darkness Crystal onto the battlefield tapped under your control with an additional +1/+1 or 2 additional +1/+1 counters on it. So you get to summon their critters.
That's brutal. That's awesome.
And finally, Zand, the Dark Mage. And I kind of hope we get a Doga and Unai.
Yeah, I was just thinking, so we'll do Zand, but I think Doga and Unai and Elia.
Yeah, Maiden of Water.
I'd be shocked almost if there wasn't an Elia Maiden of Water card.
Her song is so iconic.
Yeah,
and,
I know.
And popular, especially in Japan.
Yeah.
And they've been pulling some of those iconic, like what has become iconic in pop culture, almost meme in pop culture, and made cards of them. And I think that's great.
Yes. We'll talk more about that when we get to some stuff. But yeah.
So Zand, the Dark Mage, for 2 generic, a blue and a black, you get a 3/3 legendary creature human wizard with Menace. And Zand gets +1/+1 for each non-creature, non-land card in your graveyard. So again, some of that spell slinger. The more spells you're playing and putting in the graveyard, the bigger he is.
Yeah. Very, very cool. Yeah, do hope to see some more stuff out of Final Fantasy III there. But yeah, some pretty cool stuff. And I like the artwork of Zand, too. He's always been one of the more interestingly designed characters from those early games.
Are we ready for 4?
Yeah.
All right. So again, not a lot here. I do expect to see more out of 4.
Yeah, but...
Yeah. I will say I really like this mountain, which appears to be Mount Ordeals.
Yeah.
We've also got Kain, Traitorous Dragoon. For 2 generic and a black, you get a 2/4 legendary creature human knight. He has jump. During your turn, Kain has flying, and whenever Kain deals combat damage to a player, that player gains control of Kain. If they do, you draw that many cards, create that many tap treasure tokens, then lose that much life.
That's my favorite one so far. Kain switches sides a lot.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Isn't that great?
Man, that would create quite a bit of chaos, so to speak.
Yeah. And there are ways to gain advantage from your opponents controlling your stuff.
Oh, okay, sure.
But just on his own, I'm not sure that's a card I would play very much.
I absolutely love it, though.
Yeah, I love that he exists.
Yeah.
We've also got Rosa, the Resolute White Mage. For 3 generic and a white, you get a 2/3 legendary creature human noble cleric. She's got reach, which means she can block creatures with flying, which archers so often have. And at the beginning of combat on your turn, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. It gains lifelink until end of turn. Yeah, not bad.
All right, yeah. Artwork is phenomenal. She looks great.
And then we get a Through the Ages skin of Golbez playing the role of Sir Conrad the Grim.
Naturally. Final Fantasy V. Oh, look at the color. The first thing is just a bright, beautiful painting of Bartz and Boko, and it's the 2 of them, and I'm happy, Ira. It makes me happy. I haven't read it. I just looked at it, and I'm happy now.
So often when a card depicts a character who is mounted, it's the character who's mounted who gets the creature type. But sometimes when the creature it is mounted upon is equally as important, you get both creature types. So this is a legendary creature, human bird, because Boko and Bartz are important together.
I love it.
He's got affinity for birds, which means it costs a little less to cast for each bird you control. And when this enters, each other bird you control deals damage to equal to its power to target creature an opponent controls. And I think that's pretty great. There's kind of a push for the Chocobos to have for like a green-white bird deck, perhaps, with landfall and bird tribal or typal support, which I think is pretty great.
Yeah.
I already mentioned that Sid has mid in the background of his art, which is pretty great.
Yeah.
There's a card called Evil Reawakened, which depicts Exdeath returning out of the bowl of that evil tree.
Mm-hmm.
I love Goluf's Final Act. I'm not sure it's a very good card, but for just depicting Goluf standing up to Exdeath. And what it says is, until end of turn, target creature gets +1/+0 and gains. When this creature dies, put a number of +1/+1 counters equal to its power on up to 1 target creature. So that's Goluf not allowing Exdeath to kill him and passing his power on to Kryl.
Yeah. That's pretty good. It feels a little weak. Again, I don't know the power. It was like, it should have been a little more maybe. I don't know. But I also don't play a lot of Magic. So someone says, like, that's a lot. I don't know. But the artwork is great. And I love that Goluf gets a card.
And one of the things I've noticed about trying to evaluate the playability of cards for this format or that before they come out is that a lot of people say a lot of things. It's like predicting sports winners.
Sure.
They're all going to say a thing before the game starts, or even before the season starts, and they're not
Yeah.
always held to account for having been right or wrong.
Right. It rarely, in fact, it almost never. There's someone who's been following me forever who reminds me of this quote at the end of every baseball season. I can't remember when I said it, but he made like a little quote meme of it. And it gets me teary-eyed at the end of every baseball season. But a long time ago, I finished an article by saying, baseball, like life, it almost never turns out exactly how you thought it would. If it did, that would make it boring. But you still, I don't remember what the rest of it was. Obviously, I'm a very good writer, you see. But yeah, it's always funny to me when people get upset over the things they think are going to happen. It never pans out that way. So always good to take a deep breath there.
Next, let's talk about Gilgamesh, Master at Arms.
Always. You could actually put that sentence into literally any conversation.
And I want to point out to you, Drew, that his name is Gilgamesh, Master at Arms.
Arms.
Now, this Gilgamesh has only got the 2, but I love it. Because his casting cost is 4 generic and 2 red, which is, altogether, 6.
Oh.
And his power and toughness are 6, 6.
Yeah.
Whenever this enters or attacks, look at the top 6 cards of your library. You may put any number of equipment cards from among them onto the battlefield, put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. When you put 1 or more equipment cards onto the battlefield this way, you may attach one of them to a samurai you control. And Gilgamesh is a legendary creature, human samurai. So, like you said, you can tell sometimes in the details that people know what they're doing, and I think this is one of them.
Yeah.
We've got a swamp that appears to be the ship graveyard from Final Fantasy V. We talked about Tonberry last time we did this, and then we've got Bart's Clauser playing the role of Winota, joiner of forces from Ikoria. I think that one's fine. I like this old Amano art just being put on a magic card.
Yeah, all of those are fun. Even and I didn't mention, the Furion one where you didn't like the card, the creature type or whatever. Right. It still had that classic Amano art of Furion that I love so much. So,
right,
the visuals are great.
And one of the things I have noticed is that people who don't know Yoshitaka Amano's art or early Final Fantasy art are not big fans of some of these. Really? Yeah, they feel like it looks like a sketch. It looks unfinished, that sort of thing. I guess I can understand that to some degree, but I feel like that ethereal quality is part of what it's about. And furthermore, that I got to be careful with this phrase, but not everything is for you, right? It's okay to let certain things pass you by if they're not playing to your particular preferences. Right. And some people get upset with that with Magic because that phrase has been used to talk about how maybe certain price points are okay to have, even though they leave some people out. And that's not what I mean in this case. Right. So, yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, that's always one of those things. I really hate it when people use the subjective language of when we're talking about art and cross-apply that to the business world just as much as I hate it when it goes the other way. I tend to run into it more the other way, people using business and objective language to... I've been battling with the Star Wars people lately over Andor's the only good one and everything else sucks. And I think it's really interesting that, in Star Wars in the last 10 years or so, we've gone from I hate this because it isn't Star Wars enough to I hate this or I love this and it's okay, you guys, because it doesn't feel like Star Wars, which is how people are now praising Andor. And so, you run into those types of things, and it's interesting because I guess I never would have considered people having a deep dislike of Yoshitaka Amano art because it's so special and important to me that I'm like, why would you dislike this? But again, I can see it not being your thing, but in the world of art, in the world of taste, in the world of ideas, all that subjectivity and nuance, that's where it's great fun and great color. When we're talking about labor rights and labor practices and capitalism and human rights, that we need far less nuance. And, and so I don't like it when that line gets blurred in either direction. But back on this specific thing, Ira, this is, I think another really interesting entry in the concept of an adaptation conversation, right? You and I have gotten back into talking about Wheel of Time, where we've got a similar thing here. You've read all the books. I have not. You play Magic the Gathering. I haven't. We've had some flip sides. I can't remember. Did you watch One Piece or some of One Piece?
I watched a couple episodes.
Yeah. That's another thing where, right, it's like I'd seen some of the anime. I'd watched it for the first, I don't know how long ago, and anyone who's seen it knows there's 1,000 plus literally episodes of that show. But you come in and you bring different elements of foreknowledge when something has been adapted. And this is another interesting way of doing it. And while we sat here and went, that's not quite perfect, that Firion card doesn't really make sense, and I see what they were going for, and you can still do that kind of thing. I absolutely love that this is happening. To get back to the very basics of, people often ask, well, why? I've seen this with Final Fantasy VII, right? If they weren't going to change anything, why even do this? Why remake it if you're not going to do X, Y, and Z? And my answer to that is almost always, why remake a thing? Why retell a story? Why cover a song? The answer is almost always to open it up to a new audience. The people getting most angry, and sorry I'm up on my soapbox now, but I think that the people getting the most angry tend to be the ones who are most familiar with both, right? Who are going to have so many preconceived expectations. As Shakespeare said, and I love saying it, expectation is the root of all heartache. When you come into it with that kind of thing. But at the end of the day, another cliche I absolutely love, it really is about new people who maybe would never have played Magic the Gathering before, who are giant Final Fantasy fans, going, I'm going to check that out. I'm going to buy some packs, and I'm going to play with my friends. Not to go to tournaments and beat people, not to do this, that, or the other, not to get on the internet and debate whether or not these cards are correct. Right? I'm going to buy some packs, and I'm going to play with my friends. Magic the Gathering fans going, I've always heard about these Final Fantasy games and never really been into it, but because some of these cards are pretty neat, I might try a couple out. That's who it's for. And back to your point of, if it's not for you, no one's forcing you to participate.